Father can show up as a father, but then fail as a partner.
Having a relationship with my father. And I think even when I had a relationship with him, I was still angry. When you left, I felt like you rejected me. It wasn't rejecting my mother as your partner. It was rejecting me.
It's not to say that when you had a positive relationship with your father, like it's standard, which you are going to be getting into good relationships. You need.
They say a woman marries their father.
The first person is God, who's my father, and then my earthly father is my father. He's flawed.
Hello and welcome to How's Your Heart podcast. It is Linda for short. Thank you so much for joining me to yet another episode. And thank you so much, guys, for 1,000 subscribers. Man, here we go. Here we go. I'm so happy that you've decided to join me on this journey. And today I have a guest with me, as you can see. Welcome, sis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Although I'm a little nervous, of course.
I feel like you're also making me nervous now.
First time being on camera. Hello.
Yes, you love the camera.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to be having today. Yeah. So
do you remember how we met?
My memory tells me that actually I was even thinking we met on WhatsApp when we were busy discussing cars.
Nope. This girl, guys, we met through a mutual friend of ours at church. And I actually remember that day because I came up to you guys, and then that's when I met you, and then we went to the bathroom. Okay. And then you guys went off and did your own things. But that was the first time I was like, oh, this is a nice lady.
Okay. Thank you. Because we didn't talk much, right? I think maybe also why I've forgotten is that during that period I was meeting a lot of people. Yuli was introducing me to a lot of people. But my memory is definitely in Cornwall. Yeah. Okay, the first one is how we were deciding about the cars we're going to be hiring, and me and you going wild.
But that time...
we had met a couple of times by then.
I think so, because there was a day, I don't know if you came, when we went to church and then we ended up going to Seven Dials Market.
Yeah, I remember us going to... Wasn't that after?
That was after.
When we had Korean food and... It was before.
It was before.
Serious?
Yo, guys, your friends.
I remember Cornwall. We slept together. Come on.
That's all you remember. But the reason why it was so easy for us to sleep together or decide we're going to share a room is because we had already, we're familiar with each other.
Okay. Fair enough. That was good, though.
Well, we have known each other now for probably 2 years.
Yeah, it's 2 years.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and what has kept us together is because we just love laughing.
Yeah, honestly. True. And we do have a lot of shared interests. Yeah, we do, and we talk.
And we talk a lot. We talk a lot, and that's why she's on the podcast today to just talk.
Imagine.
Okay, let's get into our topic. I want to ask you, how's your heart? Because I feel like this topic is very much digging deep into our hearts. I'll ask you how you feel about having this conversation. So the topic, as you guys have seen, is we're talking about father-daughter relationships, and as most people know, it is daddy issues and how that impacts our romantic relationships. I think people are very much aware of how your childhood forms your perspective as an adult. And I thought you were actually the perfect person to have this conversation with because of your profession. I thought about it, I was like, because of your profession. And there's a lot of conversations around childhood trauma, healing your inner child, and amongst other things is daddy issues. I think this might be triggering for a lot of people, so please proceed with caution. We'll talk about our experiences as it relates to father-daughter relationships and how that has impacted our romantic and maybe other relationships as well. How do you feel about having this conversation? How, like, when you think about this conversation and just in general father-daughter relationships, like, what's on your heart regarding this topic?
Quite honest, I've never really thought, not that I've never really thought deeply about it, right? Obviously, when I was growing up, I had a present father, right? So I have quite a good relationship with my dad, right? But they didn't have the perfect marriage with my mother, right? So I guess growing up, even with my profession as well, with therapy as well, and faith, it's just... it's always been navigating that disconnect, Yeah, so it's just been navigating that conflict around that. But yeah, so I had to sit down and think about it now.
Yeah.
But it's something obviously I have been thinking about over the years, So yeah, it should be interesting.
In the South African context, how do you feel about the plight of like fatherless generation? I feel like it just weighs heavily on my heart. And I sometimes think like I do value mentorship, especially like for young boys, because I think most of, it's not something we're gonna get into, but most of young boys, and I guess it ends up being the people that we do date, they don't have like that role model. But what's kind of on your heart about that?
So for me, right, obviously I grew up with a very present dad, and even now at my big age, like, oh my God, guys. And to be quite honest, some of the things like when I was growing up, because even with my friends, one of my closest best friends, she had a very good relationship with her dad as well, So growing up, we had a good relationship with our fathers. They're like our chauffeurs driving us everywhere, we could talk to them as well, So it was normal. It was really normal, obviously. So when I was growing up, and then you meet friends as well, and then you start having conversations, and then things that have been like that were normal to you, you start realizing that they aren't so normal, like it doesn't really, it's not that normal, and then, not to say I never appreciated my relationship with my dad. I've always appreciated it because growing up, I was actually closer to him than my mother, So with my mother, it's now as I've become a woman where, like, I guess I need him more, So then our relationship has grown. But I'm a genuine believer. I do think children need their fathers. They genuinely really do. I've got brothers as well. So like I've always said, like I said, that my parents didn't have the smoothest relationship. I think even for fathers, it's easy for them to form relationships with their daughters, So but with their sons, it's a little bit tricky, so it's something that they have to navigate. Like I said, when I was reflecting about this, and even with therapy, like I was saying, with the conflicts, that I had a good relationship with my dad, but they didn't have the smoothest of marriages, So obviously I've been to therapy, my profession as well. So I had to get to an understanding in that parents, they parent they parent to the best of their ability, basically, So even how they show up, they've got their own traumas as well, So I had to get that understanding as well, So with my parents and like finally making harmony with that disconnect, I had to separate my father's role from my dad and from him as a husband, because I think obviously growing up, like, not to say he was perfect, but because of the kind of relationship that we have, but then as you grow up, you start seeing what's no man, like, he does have flaws, but then you have that conflict to go to ganjani, and then it's like, but this person loves me, and my dad has been consistent, bless him, like he's consistent even to this day. He still tells me he loves me, He still shares my pictures. He calls me, you know, all of those things. Like, he's the sweetest shame. So there was that disconnected. You could see, like,
yeah. I mean, I think there's two things, right? As I said at the start, there's growing up and experiencing all of that, and then as an adult, actually looking back and saying, well, my dad wasn't that perfect, or looking back and saying, well, this is probably why my parents acted this way. And I think that's beautiful, to get to a point where you can reflect and look at and heal that inner child if there are things that you didn't get as a child, or just having a different perspective. And I think we'll get into that.
Yeah. And I wanted to add on, you know, I want to give credit to my mother as well, you know, like, despite the challenges that they had in their marriage, you know, she didn't vilify my dad, you know, till today. Like, my mom didn't vilify my dad. If anything, she encouraged the relationship even till today, you know. And I think going back to your question when you were talking about South Africa, I think it's very important, although it's tough. Like, I can't imagine, you know, but like, for a woman that has a child, and obviously there's this man, and maybe he's not showing up and stuff, you know, and then you having to swallow your anger or whatever frustrations, you know, and not project that to your child, you know, because generally, a father can show up as a father, but then fail as a partner. You know? So I think maybe that's where some women lose it, you know, in thinking just because our relationship has failed, you know, then we can't, like, how is he going to show up as a dad, you know? But I think some men, given the opportunity, they generally would be able to show up for their children, you know. It's just that, obviously, like, pain, guys, like, it has a way of manifesting and poisoning everything around it. So I'm not blaming them as well, the women, but it is very important. Guys. It's very important, like, both for males and females, like, for your self-esteem, how you show up, how you relate to other people. Like, having a male figure is very important.
Wow. Starting off on a very high note. Man, I had this question, and I thought we were going to talk about it, like, off air, because I kind of feel like sometimes fathers are very disconnected to babies. And this doesn't have to be your experience, but follow my train of thought here. I feel like sometimes the reason why dads can run away or succumb to that fear of, I have to raise this person that I've brought into this earth, or they actually even run away from the situation where they don't have a good relationship with their mother, is because the mother connects with the child for 9 months. And for dads, I think it's until maybe they say dad where they feel like they are connected to. And you find that, well, I think I've seen a lot of or dads coming back into their children's lives when they're much older, when they can talk, or where they can say, oh, that's my son, or that's my daughter. And I had this question, like, because I remember listening to another podcast called That Husband Podcast, and this guy was saying he wanted to run. Like, he now understood when he had his daughter, he understood at that point why his dad might have left, because that is a great responsibility. But then the impact of that has on kids, obviously, is if you are a 20-year-old having a child, or 25-year-old, that's a great responsibility. And I always wonder, is it they just can't relate to babies? Because I know there are fathers that are really, like, from the moment they find out, like, the person is pregnant, they want to be involved and all of that, and they go to, like, baby shows, they want to be there. But then, like, most, it just feels like they're just disconnected from that stage. And I think that's why maybe some mothers would be like, oh, why are you now claiming your dad at your later stage?
Oh, yeah.
Where this guy was not there for
around
like
when you're still young.
when you were still young. And I think as well, like this idea of having this dad that you've never had, it can put it on a pedestal where it's like, oh, you've always had your mom, but you're always like thinking, oh well, what kind of relationship would I have with my dad, and why did he leave, and all of that. I've definitely felt like that because I didn't grow up with my dad. I always knew my dad, but I didn't live with him, and I thought, knowing that he wasn't part of my life for the first like 5 years, because my earliest memory of him is probably when I was 5 or 6, and maybe it did come around to see me or whatever, but I mean, now I can imagine how it comes off to my mom, like, oh, all of a sudden now you put this person in,
put this person,
you put this person up on a pedestal, and it's not that, it's just like, well, I've never had him, so I want to have the relationship with him. And yeah, like I don't know what you think of that.
What my take is on that. So as you were talking, I was thinking about if maybe we can say it, I don't want to say it's a race thing, but maybe tradition, talking about babies, right? I think, like if you think about it, for white men, right? For instance, when the baby is born, right? They've always been trained in that nappy changing, feeding, so it's common in the white community, right? So when your baby is like a couple of months, when they start crawling, you're not scared, right? You're not scared because, I mean, you've already been there, know. But when it comes to black men, I don't think obviously this new generation of men, they are learning and they're coming around. But I think looking back in the past, not to say like give grace, but we can have a bit more understanding in how our fathers showed up in terms of responsibilities. For instance, I think men don't know what to do from an African perspective when a child is still young. They know how to provide. They don't even know how to play with their children, guys. So, and for us women, especially African women, like we're raised to see, once you give birth, like your baby's your baby, because you are the one that's feeding, taking care of the baby, waking up at night, so all of that responsibility lies with you. So then men tend to relax, because they think it's not their responsibility, so and then the woman ends up so that's why then babies are gonna end up having like a stronger relationship with their mother, right? But so maybe it's, I wouldn't say lack of knowledge, but conversations, education around that, because fathers today, they are able to do that. They help out with their wives. Even women, I think in the past, they haven't been able to communicate for themselves. So I think for us women now, we are taught to be able to articulate our needs even better, because I know with one of my friends, she was saying when she had a kid, she's married, when the baby was born, even before the baby was born, you go for nappy changing classes, all of that, so that, because fathers generally are scared, when a baby's born, it's like, oh, this human being, and I think it genuinely clicks with their head, especially from an African perspective, being that as a male, you need to provide, protect these people now. So you're seeing your wife and this baby and you're thinking, okay, now I'm responsible for these people. And then it's naturally not in them to be nurturers, but obviously you teach them. So I think that's why you do get that disconnect. But for fathers who have been able to do that, I think they actively pursued that, they actively pursued having an active relationship with their children. With me, I had a, like with my dad, he was my friend when I was growing up. He used to read storybooks. They didn't stay together with my mother, but he used to come every single day. Even his job allowed him, while my mom was at work, even when he was at daycare, he would come around. I remember him reading books, coming in the lounge. My mom, I remember she told me, Guti, when I was born, like, my grandmother had to come and ask for permission. Can my dad come in and see me every day because they weren't married? And he would come in every day. I've got pictures, reading storybooks. I love reading because that's something we used to do together, even when I was growing up. So even when I was still a toddler, not a toddler, I meant like primary school. In my neighborhood, I didn't connect with a lot of like my peers then.
So your dad was your friend?
Yes, he was my friend. So he would come pick me up and we would drive around, listen to music, guys. So he was my friend, bless him, he was my friend because he would come every day, even with my cousins. Like when he would come and see me with Sangaga kids, Mathapelo, like anytime he would rock up. So I think it's just you being active, like, and wanting that. So going back to that, my mother used to say, with your father, and we didn't have the perfect relationship, but I think one thing, like what's the word, right, is that like he was a present dad. So I can never take that away from him, like from when you were born, so
I guess then it's like up to the person, I guess, as well. But yeah, I want to get into like how then did you form a relationship? I guess it's your dad, right, that was coming over. He was showing up. So therefore you kind of relied on him, and you said at the start like he was very consistent and very present. And did you find that the emotional side as well, like when did you first confide in him about like what's happening at school, whether you're bullied, or like finding that comfort place?
So I think forming that emotional relationship, I wouldn't say I can necessarily pinpoint when it happened, but I think maybe it's because he's always been there in ways that mattered when I was a child. So by the time I grew up, like I was able to talk to him, about things. Even when I was a teenager as well, like when I started my cycle, the first time I went with my dad to go, I'm telling you.
Wow.
I'm telling you. So we went together.
What did you say? I was even afraid to tell my mom, like, what did you say?
So we went together, right? So when we got to the store, my memory is that when we got to the store, right, it's like I felt awkward about it. So when I felt awkward, we'd say, okay, what is it that we get? And then I remember going into that woman's aisle, like confused. And then he was like, Hanana,
buy the expensive ones.
Exactly. So and even when I was growing up, going all the way to university as well, like I've used him as an emergency call. Sometimes like you shouldn't be out, like and you're like, if I call home, I'm gonna get into trouble. But I've called my dad. Like I remember, like I've used that emergency call, even though I know it wasn't permitted. But he always said to me, he would say, I would rather you call me when you're into trouble than rather get into trouble and then end up finding yourself in a situation because you're afraid of me. Because when I had left, like my friends and I were supposed to go to like a party. And then when we get there, we say, guys, like you are a man, and I'm like,
You should not be there.
And I had told my dad that I'm going elsewhere. That's So after that, I was like, So then I called him, guys, it was just purely that. And he came. But because of that relationship, right, like I've never wanted to disappoint him as well because he trusted me so much, So I think because of that relationship, it kept me away from like getting into some situations as well. So I could easily say no to things because I knew like I don't want to disappoint him as well, because he believed in me so much, you know. So yeah, so I think that emotional relationship, it starts from a young age. Like I can't imagine how it would be like when you are much older, all of a sudden starting to talk with your mother, you know, like I said, with your father, you know, especially being from the opposite gender. Like I said, with me, I'm closer with my mother now, you know, because I think becoming a woman, you know, that's when you need them more. You know, yes, we still do talk with my dad. We still do talk, but I feel like mom relates more to issues now
that you're going through.
Yeah. So I can't imagine like if like maybe dad missed that period from a young age, how it would be like as you grow older.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I had this question towards the end of this conversation, but I feel like it should be able to like flow into this conversation about trust, because I feel like that those formative years, they formed trust. Even you being able to call your dad at night and saying, hey, like I'm in trouble. I don't imagine could never even now I could never. I need to figure myself out.
You know what he did after? So when I was in university, he gave me his card and I put it in my Uber app. Yeah, so he could track. My movements. So yeah.
And this thing, this thing about trust, as we're getting into how like father-daughter relationships affect romantic relationships. There's obviously a big part of relationships is about trust, and you said something recently in one of our group chats. I think it might have been Bible study or the book club, but you talked about like trust. And I think for a lot of us that were struggling with trust or with trust issues, kind of had a pin drop. That, you know, how you trust your romantic partner is fundamental to your relationship. And as I'm hearing you talk, I am establishing that trust that you have with your dad, it transcends to like romantic relationship, because you're not coming from a point of not trusting men, right? It's like, oh, the man that has been in my life has always been trustworthy, has always been consistent, has always shown up for me, and has always been my safe space. And for me, it's like the opposite, because I've always had my mom, I've always had my grandfather died at, like I was really young. So like father figure in my life was like non-existent, even though I knew my dad, but he wasn't someone that was coming to discipline me, or someone that was you know, like played much of a role in my life. I would see him here and then, and I lived with him for maybe 2 years max, but even then I didn't feel that sort of like safe space to be able to like rely on him. So I guess that kind of formed my perception of men and relying on men. And yeah, I just want us to talk about trust in romantic relationship, and how you probably like maybe the relationship that you have with your dad has formed kind of that trust in men. I think you mentioned an example of like, if you're going somewhere with your partner and he says, let's go this way, and you start questioning because you are this independent woman and you have opinions and you've never really trusted men, then he's going to feel like, you know, you are taking away his authority and you cannot depend on him. You cannot follow his lead. So yeah, let's just talk about that. Okay. If you remember.
You would have to remind me about what that conversation was about. But if I remember, it was about how when I've gone into relationships, or when I'm in a relationship with someone, because I always go in with the good intentions, right? So I'm not always thinking, is this person out to harm me? Or when they make a suggestion, I'm like, so I always come in like with the best of intentions. So I'm not always thinking, Uguti, they want to hurt me or not, right? So like I don't go in with mistrust. Yeah.
So yeah, I got into some kind of research, and I think we're looking at this on not opposite sides, but kind of like the like having a present father and having like not so present father emotionally. And I came across this study on daddy issues, and they said that there's 6 symptoms of daddy issues as it relates to romantic relationships. And these symptoms can be if someone is possessive and clingy, they're demanding, and overabundance of love and assurance. So they want to be assured all the time. They want sex all the time. They're interested in dating older men. If you're afraid of being alone, that might also be an indicative of daddy issues, or you repeatedly choose to be with abusive men. And looking at the healthy part of healthy father-daughter relationships, one is that a positive father-daughter relationship can foster a sense of security and self-worth in the daughter, leading to better mental health outcomes. It can also contribute to communication skills, emotional regulation, and resilience. A secure father-daughter relationship can help the daughter explore her identity and create healthy boundaries. There's a good father-daughter relationship will lead to feelings of acceptance, improved self-esteem, and lower rates of depression and behavioral problems. They're less likely to act out in school, fail classes, or engage in risky, delinquent behaviors. And man, when I was looking at this, like just comparing these two, I know I have become someone who's possessive sometimes and clingy, demanding assurance. I guess that stems from maybe not hearing like, oh, I love you, or being affirmed and things like that. And there's one thing I think people tend to forget when it comes to these father-daughter relationships. It's like, well, you have your mom. Like, yes, it's not the same. You have your mom, but I think as a child, you always wishing to have what you don't have, because as a child you can't reason that I must appreciate what I have. When I look back now, I'm like, oh, I am because of what my mom has done, the sacrifices that she's made for me. But I'm also like, oh, I wish my dad could have done some sacrifices to affirm it, to assure me, and all of that. And coming into adulthood and understanding, oh, okay, these are the reasons why he wasn't there, and all of that. It still makes sense. I can reason, but it doesn't take away the impact that it has had on my view of relationships, on my view on men in general, on my view on what I wish I could have had. And I think also maybe something that was not mentioned here is just feelings of not being wanted, because I feel like I've heard this a lot when people share about their struggles with father-daughter relationships, and they're like, well, when you left, I felt like you rejected me. It wasn't rejecting my mother as your partner. It was rejecting me. And I think it's maybe hard for fathers to understand that, because it's like, oh, well, I couldn't go see you. We didn't have a relationship with your mom, or your mom was withholding me seeing you and stuff. And like, well, you didn't try it hard enough. So when you hear these healthy father relationships, can you identify with the things that I read?
Yeah. No, definitely. I can identify with a lot of those things, right? Like I was saying, I had a good relationship with my dad, right? Because he was consistent and emotionally available, right? So I've always known, Uguti, I wanted to have a family of my own, right? And I desired to have kids someday, you know? But then I also had this in that how they modeled a romantic relationship for me, you know? So then obviously growing up and having to heal from that disconnect, you know, and make understand, you know? So then I was like, okay, what I learned from them basically is that, that some relationships can come with pain and disappointment, you know, and that, when it comes to relationships, trust, you know, like what I learned from their marriage, you know, and then once broken, you know, it's not easily repaired, you know, and that pain also, if left untreated, you know, it can fester, and you know, so that's what I learned, you know, but I didn't have a negative view of men, right? So by the time I went into romantic relationships, you know, I already had a standard in that, I wanted someone that was emotionally available, like how my dad was emotionally available for me, but I didn't want 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you know? So when I was growing up, actually, there was this song, Beyonce did. It's steady. Yeah, well, it's a nice song. But there's way it says, I want my husband and I want my son to be like my daddy. I've never, my best friend, that was her song. She wanted a husband and my son. So I was like, no, I don't want that. You know, I don't want that. So when it comes to, like you were saying, when it comes to romantic relationships, so it's not to say that, it's not to say that when you had a positive relationship with your father, it's standard, you are going to be getting into good relationships. You need to be reflecting on your parents' marriage as well. Because I know some people who have had, who come from parents where the parents had a healthy romantic relationship as well, but when they get into romantic relationships, then they become unrealistic, you know, yes, because of what they've seen. Your father is your father. I mean, you can adopt certain traits and desire certain traits in your partner, but you can't want your husband or boyfriend to be like your dad.
They say a woman marries their father. So
you can, I feel like you can desire certain traits, but you need to allow people to show up how they are. Because imagine, Alindo, you get married to someone and someone is wants you to be like their mother, like this. My mom was like this. You wouldn't want it as well as a woman, you know? So why would you want that from your partner as well? So I think maybe for me, that was also the positive thing that came out of their marriage as well, in that it was easy for me to not go into relationships with the rose-colored glasses, you know, to say I want perfection. Other people, because of that positive relationship as well, can have unrealistic expectations. So yeah.
That's so important, because I think what I've been reiterating is that when you have something, you want what you don't have, right? And when I guess if we're looking at, oh, well, you've had a good relationship with your dad and you now want your partner to be your dad. And it's like, well, I'm my own person. And that can also be negative as well, because now you want this person to act like your dad. And also, I think that's also can be a negative, or can be classified as daddy issues, because now if you can't marry your father.
No, definitely you
can't marry your father.
Yeah.
You're gonna say?
No, I wanted to say also, but with not having fathers around, right? Like you, for instance, you said your father didn't, he was only until you were 5 years old, you know. So I think what we can appreciate as well is that obviously you had your mom that affirmed you, you know. So what, for me personally, what I've learned to appreciate is that my dad, like him being present, it was definitely very positive for me. in that it was good for my self-esteem, knowing how to draw boundaries and whatnot, but some of the things when it comes to romantic relationships, these are things that I've had to learn for myself, so it's not to say, obviously with the help of my profession, like I said, so it's not to say because you had a positive relationship with your dad, like everything is just going to be smooth. Some of the things you learn because you don't live in a box, you see relationships outside of you, how they are being modeled, so especially as you grow older,
without getting into deep about the impact that, so we've established like how positive the impact your dad being around and being emotionally present has had on you, and maybe not necessarily on relationships, because then when you saw him in a relationship, it was in a different perspective because of their relationship with between your mom and your dad. And I just want to go back because I think we're talking more about what we're seeing now and reflecting and being adults and saying, well, in that situation, I understand why this could happen or whatever. How have you attached yourself to like men or like romantic relationships because of the circumstance that you grew up in? And I don't necessarily want you to get into like the details of that relationship.
The thinking about myself, obviously without getting too deeply into it, I've been in relationships, right? And they didn't work out for various reasons, but when those relationships ended, I left knowing I was loved and valued in those relationships, and reflecting on this, the relationship that I had with my dad, I was emotionally available, so, even when you do going back to the love languages, I think I'm going to tie it back to the attachment styles. I know for me, the top two is the quality time and the words of affirmation. So I don't know if it's because of the affirmation I used to get at home. That's why I want that. And genuinely quality time, like I want to be sitting down with someone talking, giving me your attention, So, so it goes back to that. So I value like kindness, right? Respect and emotional availability. Not to say the relationships didn't work out, because they didn't have that, but those so those are the things that I value the most. So I think honestly, I'd be lying, honestly, if I said when it comes to romantic relationships, I've got traumatic experiences. Like, I'd honestly be lying. Like, I think even one of my best friends used to say this as well. Good see, the reason Mathapelo, it's because of Dalo's phone nail. So like I've always gone into relationships knowing what I can't tolerate and I can tolerate, and I've been very fortunate to date like kind men as well, so so I don't know if I'll give credit to I think I can give credit to my parents' relationships and the secure attachment style, in that I haven't stayed in places where I was like getting triggered now, because I think more than anything with my parents' experience, I've always known what I desire, like family and relationship, and then but I've grown up knowing good I'd rather have, like not have, than to have and then be miserable, so so even when I've gotten to relationships, it was like, if it's not working, like would rather not, because like a lifetime is a long time to spend with someone that doesn't make you happy. So like staying in relationships for a long time when it's not working, it's like I'm just inflicting trauma on myself, because then, like I said to you, what I've learned is that pain left unhealed, guys, like it festers, and some things like with trust, like it's not only like someone can break your trust, guys. You know, like you were talking about violence as well, like an abusive partner, like someone is breaking. It's not only infidelity, you know, or someone saying they're gonna show up, accompany you somewhere, and then they're not showing up. Like you learn to not trust that person. So how are you in a relationship with someone you can't trust like that? You know, so yeah.
I guess it's not necessarily someone choosing to stay or choosing to have a certain type of attachment style. It just manifests in that way. And this is what it's called, the symptoms of father-daughter relationships. Or it might just be, I don't think someone, like a lot of people fall into one category as like a fearful attachment. I think it can show up in different ways with different people at different times as well throughout the relationships. And sometimes you can catch yourself like, why am I demanding like this? Like, where is that coming from? And I think, as I said at the start, it can be a trigger from what you've experienced before, whether it's at home or like during those formative years. I think, I don't think I can just say like, oh, I've just had like a secure attachment style throughout my relationships. Because there's been times where I feared losing a relationship, a relationship, or I was dismissive, like I'm just independent, I don't need anyone, I can do this by myself, like whatever. Especially now, because I'm just like, what are you bringing in my life? Like,
no, sure. What you're saying, obviously, when it comes to trauma, you know, and like you're saying with attachment styles, it shows up in ways that you are not aware of, you know, especially when you are young, because you are not aware of these things, you know. But I'm someone that always says, I stand to be corrected, you know, so I'm very open to feedback, you know, and I can never say, Guti, I know I said Guti as phone, but I can never say, Guti, everything or all decisions that I've made, it's because of me. I'm very grateful for my circle as well and the positive relationships that I've had. You know, I was even thinking, Guti, you know, some things as a teenager, you've been protected from, not because you were smart, you know, it's also because of the circle that you had around you, you know. So I think like I was saying with my best friend as well, she had a very secure relationship with her dad, so I fed off on that as well, you know. So yeah. So some things when you're still young, you honestly should give yourself grace. Like how you showed up, the mistakes that you made as you grow older, even since we're talking about relationships, some situations you stayed longer in than you needed to, you know. It's like, give yourself grace, you know. And now that you know better, you know, it's not to say things will be perfect, you might still fall into it, but you know, think about life. I always say it's a journey, guys. We're constantly healing, learning about ourselves, so you'll never get to a point where you're like your ultimate perfection. Even when you get married, there's still things he'll be doing that trigger you, even though you may have
Man, I'm so grateful that you've decided to have this conversation with me, honestly. And I think one thing that I was also excited to talk about was because we know God as the Father, and I was interested in how you relate to God as a father. And I can almost infer from what you've said about your father, because you've had an earthly father that is present. You could probably relate to God as the Father, relate to that character of God. When we read, so we're part of a book club, a faith book club, and we read The Power of a Praying Woman. And one of, like, she listed all the characteristics of God. Okay, not all of them, because it's probably an exhaustive list. It's not an exhaustive list, but one of the few characters that she mentioned is God the Father. And I just began to ask myself, man, how do I relate to God as the Father? And I think when I pray, I say, Heavenly Father, but that kind of made me stop and think and just quickly, like how do you relate to God as the Father?
As the Father. Okay. So going back to this, right? So I was raised a Christian, right? And then I went to a Catholic school as well, So like even when I was growing up, I never had a period where I was rebellious and I moved away from Christianity, If anything, my relationship with God and my faith has grown deeper with the years, So I've always like sought solace in him. Yes, obviously I've had questions when I was growing up, but that didn't turn me away from the faith, So, and when I was growing up also, I had a God-fearing grandmother, So even when I was growing up, like going back to my parents, even when there were times where maybe I'd want to be disobedient, my grandmother would always remind me, you would see, I needed to honor my mother and my father, especially when it comes to my mother, because I think that woman, like, I stressed her so much. I stressed her so much in the sense that, like, I was closed off, so I was very open with my grandmother, so... Yeah. So going back, like I had the responsibility first to honor my parents, so going back to my parents, like with my father, like I've said that he's my father, right? But I've had to grow and have the understanding that he also has flaws and he's a flawed man, right? And especially like I was saying, I started dating when I was much older, but how I obviously came to that realization was when I got disappointed, with my dad, because it's not like we haven't had conflict as well where I pulled away, but he pursued me, my father,
okay, stop there. He pursued you, because that's what God does. He pursues us.
He pursued me and apologized, and then we spoke about it. So, but during that period when I was disappointed, because like I said, I've had a good relationship with this person and to some degree not idolized him, but it was like, how can you hurt me like that? So then I had to learn to separate my father, good see he's a father, but God is my father, So then I grew in my relationship with God so much, like it's always been there, but I grew. And then now, like as I've grown older, and that's even when my dad has made things, it's like,
he's a man.
He's a man, he's a human being. I can't expect perfection from him. The one person that I expect perfection from is God. Like he's the one person that is always going to give me security, comfort, and love. It's God first that I need to honor, so I think it's grown more as in my awakening as well as becoming a young woman, in that the first person is God, who's my father, and then my earthly father is my father. He's flawed, so in as much as yes, I love him very much, deeply, but he's a human being. Human beings are flawed, but God is number one. So even now as I've grown older, it's like even with my responsibility and how I approach things, it's like if I'm doing things, I'm not disappointing my parents, I'm disappointing God first. And like I was saying, I'll give credit to my circle as well and the kind of community that I was raised in, in that despite the challenges, I never rebelled. And I don't think it's because of how I was raised. I think it was because of the whole Christian community, the friends I had, my grandmother as well, who could ground me with God's word, so just going with that fear of God as well. So yeah.
That's so good. I love that you got to a space, and you sharing as well about how like your father's not like the perfect man or the perfect he's probably the perfect father, but not the perfect man. And I think sometimes we can idolize people so that like in such a way that we want them to act a certain way, and then when we get disappointed, we like don't want anything to do with that. So I thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, I was just thinking how I came to a place of, accepting my father and having a relationship with my father. And I think even when I had a relationship with him, I was still angry at sometimes I was still angry. I was still like very much, like at some points I just didn't want to have a relationship with him, because those things would come back. Then I think once I let God be the father, I then understood that all my cares, all my worries, all my provision comes from him. My protection comes from him. And it wasn't, oh, now I don't need anything from my earthly father, but it was, I'm more dependent on God the Father. And I just want to read this on reframing our identity. God helps us to reframe our identity and to encourage someone that even if you felt like there were that you had a present father, or where you had a present father or a father that was in the home but they were not present emotionally, or a father that you saw once here and then, or just you didn't have a father altogether. I think God helps us to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling worthy and not rejected by people, by men. And when I mean men, I mean like human beings, and not to fear having relationships, because one of the symptoms of just having daddy issues is maybe fearing to have relationships, or fearing that people will leave. And knowing God as a father can help see ourselves deeply loved and in the way that God sees us as his children, and not being defined by our earthly father's failures, but by God's acceptance. And I think that was so true for me when I got to a place of forgiveness and just freedom. I also had this conversation with my dad where it got to a space of like forgiveness, because I had been harboring all of this in me, and I've like talked about it in therapy over the years, and I had never confronted him like, oh, why were you not there, and stuff like that. And I think it must have been 2 years back, or even less than then, where I felt like, okay, we came to a point of this tension was kind of now coming to be peace. And it's God
it's
that
very freeing, isn't it? It is.
It's God that allows that, and it empowers us to forgive in spaces where we can say, you are not there, but like, what about now? What is happening now? And not to excuse the wrongdoing, not to 100%. Excuse what people not being responsible or taking responsibility or not being accountable, but it's to say like, I'm older and I've seen now my friends who go through the same thing, that, you know, baby daddies just disappearing off the face of the earth. And I'm like, that could easily be me. And that's one of the reasons why I pray to God. We had this conversation. I pray to God. God would be, he would know if I would be pregnant outside of wedlock. Like, I could never see myself putting my child through what I went through, through what I still go through sometimes, not allowing them to even have the chance to have an emotionally available dad. Because I feel like if I would choose to have a child outside of wedlock, it's like that, even that first step is like, I'm taking it away from them. But I think, God empowers us to forgive and to free ourselves from being bitter. And look, when you look at someone, if you have unforgiveness in your heart, we look at them and it takes you back. It always takes you back. And that person is living their lives, and you're here like, how could they live their lives? And here I am dealing with such and such and such. And you know what? It's healing is a progressive journey. You can never arrive in a place of healing. There will be things that will be triggering things along the way. But
no, definitely. Just to add on to that, with my experience, with my own experience when it comes to that. I think it was in my mid-20s when I was telling you when my dad pursued me, but during that period, I remember like being so conflicted and being so mad and angry, and I had even gone to stay at my grandmother's place, but obviously I still went to church every Sunday, hey guys, teaches forgiveness, preaching. And then I remember coming to a conclusion, would say, ultimately, God, our parents, you've entrusted them to raise us, but we don't belong to them, and that's how I made peace with that situation. And then I was able to meet my dad halfway as well, and we got to that place of forgiveness and understanding. And it's like, so I had to come to that. I would say they've just been entrusted to raise us, but if they fail, it's not, it's not up to them. It's just them having faith what God had entrusted them to do, but the onus is on you because you know better, not that you know better, but they've given you faith, so if there's one thing right, they definitely did is that. So everything else navigated with your own relationship with God. So being in relationship with him is definitely very important.
That's so true. And I thought as well, not only does our relationship with God help us to forgive, it also helps us to heal our view of love, as it relates to romantic relationships and maybe like other relationships that where you felt like unforgiveness, or I think in relation to what we're talking about the impact of having like father-daughter relationships and the impact that it has on romantic relationships. And when we look at God, he heals our view of love. If we've experienced neglect, abandonment, or unhealthy love from people, and maybe in our romantic relationships, or we feel like neglected. And in Jeremiah 31:3, it says, God's love is constant and faithful. And when we receive God's love, we stop seeking validation from a partner. That, man, when you get that freedom and you enter into the relationship with God and you form a place of security, because you're like, well, that didn't work out. Fine. You're not like, oh, why? And now you start looking at yourself differently, or you're just like, okay.
I love growing up so much.
Like
I love it because you know how obviously we are here working in London, guys, and you've decided to have a family and children, but then like as you grow older, you realize, I think having pursued like your career, your studies, and chasing, I think growing up you get to a place where you are like, ultimately, like I've chased and then I've gotten this, how maybe I don't know if you can relate, when you get your first qualification, and then like, you're so happy, and then you acquire the next thing, and then but ultimately it's like you learn, you don't get true contentment from those things. You generally don't, guys. You generally don't. So being in relationship with God, that's what helps. I don't know. For me, like being in London, I feel like I've grown so much in my relationship with God, and I wouldn't have been able to survive if it wasn't for him, So, and that true contentment, you are surrounded with all of these things, your dreams that you've desired, but then after it's like, but then after you're like, what's ultimately what I've been happy with is the things that I've been surrounding myself with that are about God, so you really do get true contentment from being in relationship with him.
And I think my final thoughts on love, romantic relationships, and trusting God, and trusting men. I think I'm at a point where this year God has really been challenging me to trust him more, and I think once that relationship of trust has been established and understanding what trusting God means, I think now it's like, okay, I can trust God, you know, and once that relationship is restored and you understand that God can never fail us, God is honest, God is trustworthy, and what I hold on to is God is worthy to be trusted. Like, he is worthy. It doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter. God is worthy to be trusted. And with that reflection, then I can be like, okay, God, you're worthy to be trusted. So if I put my relationship with my dad in your hands, you're worthy to be trusted. You are going to be faithful in growing us in that relationship. And it has been amazing to grow that relationship with my dad, being able to rely on him. Like, you know, like before I came to London, like I was feeling uncertain. I was calling him like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. You know, like nothing seems like it's working. And because he's as a man of faith, I believe that also has just like seeing him trust God and seeing him being like after God and having a zeal for the things of God has also encouraged me, because I can see him holistically. And now I can rely on him. I can say, hey, I need this. Can you please do this for me? And we're building that relationship as we are growing older. And yeah, I think even having that relationship at later stage in life, I'm still very appreciative of that relationship. Yeah, what are your final thoughts?
This was a very interesting conversation. This was a very interesting conversation, but I think final thoughts for me, following from today's conversation, is that number one, God is our Father, right? He's our Father first, and healing also comes from God, you know. And when it comes to our earthly fathers as well, yeah, they're human beings, you know. They're human beings, they are flawed, but God is not flawed. So yeah.
Well, that's it on today's show. Thank you so much for joining us on this topic. I know, man, if you have arrived to this point, thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your heart. It's really beautiful. Yeah,
it is interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.